everyone. Welcome to the Self Agency Advocate podcast. I'm your host, Amanda, and this is a space where we explore, discover, and share tools, techniques, and wisdom to help you build and maintain a sense of agency. I am so excited about today's conversation. I first came across Nina through word of mouth, really. I was hearing a lot of different things about this magical kind of sexual unicorn. And I know that sounds so strange, but bear with me. I had heard so many different things about how this woman could really help you tap into not only your inner truth and your inner power, but she had the capabilities and know-how to help you tap into intimacy with yourself and your partner or whatever it looked like. And then I had the absolute pleasure of joining Nina at one of her workshops, and it was such a life-altering experience. It was really captivating, and it just blew my mind on how we could have such vulnerable and candid conversations, but really get into the meat of what intimacy looks like and what it feels like and the potential for it. So I've got Nina with me today, who is someone who absolutely ignites that sexuality. And I think one of her main things is that she can help you have probably the best orgasms you will ever experience. And I mean, who doesn't want to know more about that? So Nina, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I love that introduction. And yes, it is very true. I get many emails from people telling me they had the best sex that they've ever had last night, my clients, which is pretty amazing. And it's more than that, of course. You know, the sex is like the physical part, but it's like what it means to somebody to have access to this potential within them. I think that's the bigger piece. It's like, wow, that was magical.
Yeah.
Wow, I tapped into magic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so incredible. And it's so amazing that that is achievable, because I think when we come from this idea of, I guess in the Western culture, like sex can be very taboo. Like we don't talk about it. We don't even say the private part words, you know, like we very much cover these things up and we don't talk about self-pleasure or connection with ourselves. And we, a lot of the time, don't talk about sexual experiences with partners or what that looks like, the good, the bad, the everything in between, because it feels very much those things need to stay behind closed doors. So the fact that you can bring this to the forefront and make these conversations not only so accessible, but so enjoyable. Like I just remember having conversations with you and feeling a sense of freedom after a conversation. And I felt so not only empowered in my own femininity, but in my own truest self. And I think that's so incredible.
Mm.
So what brought you down this path? Like how did
Mm.
you get here?
Yeah, it's definitely a story. I used to work in the corporate world. So I grew up in a very like alternative environment in a community in New Zealand with a lot of well-educated people that had like decided to skip society's norms and go and live on a shared piece of land. And it was a very sort of
Wow.
very like I feel very blessed. It was a very amazing childhood, lots of other kids running around, very safe place, and a real sense of connection with my body and freedom in my body. But then I also like came from this like hippie background. So when I was going through school and when I was going through university, I had this thing in my head that I really wanted to be this professional, like in this sense of like what a professional would be. And I was very much headed to the corporate world. And that was where I, you know, I thrived in a lot of ways. But there was also a sense, I went through a divorce. I've been together with someone for 9 years. And as I went through that divorce with him, I started to question everything in my life. It was like, okay, so if that is ending, what about everything else? Do I really want everything else? And yeah, I just started to realize that like sitting in this room full of computers for a lot of the time, I did a lot of going on site and traveling around the world as well, you know, with this corporate job. It had some exciting elements,
Mm.
but I was often just like writing reports and in a room full of computers, and I just, I don't know, it's just this sense of like, is this really it? And I started to really
Wow.
question, is this going to be my life?
Mm.
And I could feel the sense of life force being sapped out of me in that space once I started to do a lot of yoga, and I was started some meditation. I started to do some self-development programs. I started to realize that there was this misalignment with this like amazing energy and life force that I felt in some environments, and then this like
Mm.
sucking life force out in this corporate world.
Mhm.
And I started to just like follow these threads in my life. So at the end of the divorce, I had Googled meditation and community, and I ended up at this conscious clubbing weekend in the countryside. I was living in the UK in Bristol, and it was out in Dorset.
Hmm.
And it was this really, really amazing experience of like lots of dancing, lots of workshops that I'd never actually done anything like that before, like satsang workshops and tantra workshops, and just these
Mhm.
expanding experiences. And then I just started to follow this thread. I was like, wow, I really like that. And I started to do more workshops. It's like, oh, I really like that.
Mhm.
And then my mum had this book on her bookshelf. I came home to New Zealand for a visit, and it was called Wishcrafting. And
Mm.
I started to dive into it because I was questioning, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And it felt really uncomfortable, like stressful, even trying to work this thing out, not having a clue what
Mhm.
direction to go in, but knowing it was really, really important to me. And that book started to help me get a sense of like how I'd want to be living. And so I started there really. I was like, okay, so I really want to be living in a place more in nature where there's like water within 10 minutes for me to swim in. And I could imagine this partner that I was going to
Mhm.
have who was quite like earthy but creative, and we were going to have this house, and I don't know, there was going to be people around, and I imagine having a gardener, which I don't have yet, but I still imagine one day I'll have a gardener because I don't have time to do it all, but I love having the garden.
Yeah.
and and then that sort of started there. And then I was doing all these workshops with sexuality, and I was just really enjoying them. And I realized that I was much more at ease in this realm than anyone else that I knew. And that I was always having these
Mm.
conversations with people about sex. And I just always have this immense curiosity about, oh, what was that like? And oh, let's tell me more about that. And
Mhm.
just noticed that I
Mhm.
didn't have a lot of the judgments or fears that other people seem to have. And so I just took a leap. I actually sold my engagement ring from when I was married, and I and I
Mm.
paid and I invested in a program, invested in a training program. Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. I went to the shop, and it was like just the right amount of money.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, which was awesome. It was like the real like end of something and the beginning of something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I started doing this training, and then it was kind of funny because I was doing this training and doing a lot around breath and embodiment, and sort of going into this workplace and spending quite a lot of breaks going to the toilets and doing breathing exercises and things because they would bring me back to life. And I had this sort of
Mm.
secret life that was forming, that I didn't dare share with my work colleagues, that then became the next leap. At some point, I just had to take the leap. I'd started working with clients. Started to reduce my days down to 4 days a week at work. And I'd started to see clients on that one day, all like totally in secret. So I didn't want to share with my
Mm.
colleagues because it was just felt, even for me, even though I was so at ease with sexuality, it still felt like this edginess to say what I was doing,
Mhm.
which is quite interesting now. Actually, one of my
Yeah.
boss who
That
originally employed me at this consultancy was doing ergonomics, human factors consultancy, and we're still in touch actually, and we chat quite a lot. And he's really supportive of my new work. Quite funny, but a lot of the other
that's
people I work
amazing.
with, I don't hear from. Yeah, it's quite funny. He's very like cheers me on all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I've been
Wow.
doing this work now for how long has it been? So it was 2014 that I quit the corporate job and started to do this full time. So yeah, it's been like 5 years almost now,
Mhm.
which is
Wow.
amazing. It's like, wow, that's a whole nother lifetime almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big chunk. So when you started this journey and started making these shifts, because
Mm,
there's so much in that obviously occurred and serendipitously fell into place and led you into this space.
mm,
But it's sounding to me like you have always had some, I don't obviously know, but some sort of deeper connection to that sense of self and that self agency in a sense, just because hearing the way that you grew up, it sounds very already connected. Or, correct me if I'm wrong, was this sense of self or this agency something that cultivated when your path started to shift? What does self-agency mean to you, and how did you come across it and make it a part of your daily experience?
I think I've always had a sense of following my own path from quite a young
Mhm.
age, doing things that weren't how other people might have done them. I've always sort of taken quite big leaps into various things in my life, such as moving to London at like age
Mhm.
17, which is pretty crazy when I look back
Wow.
on it. And
Mhm.
various things where I've leapt and I suppose taken steps into places that are scary. And for me,
Mhm.
I would say that sense of like that self agency has become more prominent as far as awareness the more that I've done various practices that are centered around embodiment, like doing yoga and meditation practices, and then actually through the sexuality awakening. Because when I really did all of
Mhm.
that work on myself sexually, it opened me up to me in a bigger, greater, more expanded way. And that
Mhm. Right.
becomes like a compass to decision making for me, like being led
Mhm.
by the body. I think of self agency as really something that is, yeah, like body led, because I believe that our
Mhm.
body is the messenger of our soul. And when I think of self agency, I think of very much about like your soul led path, like the way that you're supposed to be living that is in alignment with who you really are. And the body is the biggest
Mm.
communicator. And could even say, I mean, in Kabbalah they talk about the body being the soul, and when we research like the wild woman archetype as well,
Mm.
the body is seen as the feminine soul. It's like the messenger for us. And the more in tune and in touch with the messages that you receive through your feelings and sensations and emotions and inner knowing,
Mhm.
that becomes the self agency that over time I've become more so much more aware that it gets harder and harder to like override it.
Right.
Like there'll be certain things. It might be something as simple as like knowing that I feel drawn to phone somebody,
Mhm.
and then if I don't do it, like there can be such a strong feeling in my belly or in my body somewhere like, oh, I was supposed to do this thing.
Yeah, wow.
It becomes much more clear. do
Interesting.
you what what do you feel in terms of that as well? Is that in alignment with any ways that you view?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think that felt sense is one of the most important discoveries that I made along the way. And it wasn't that it's a
Mm,
discovery, it's almost a remembering, right? Like we come from this knowing, we come from this innate
mm,
wisdom, and we kind of not necessarily forget it, but it gets really washed down with external
mm-hmm.
factors or this information that we're inundated with of how we should act and what we should do and all of these
Yeah,
shoulds. And over time,
yeah,
that felt sense gets a little quieter and a little less easy to access. So when I rediscovered that connection and I tapped back into it, you can't turn it off again. It's like it is very much
yeah,
there. And when you're out of alignment or you're doing something that doesn't
yeah,
resonate with your truth, you feel
yeah,
that at such a cellular level. Like your body just, it absolutely talks
Yeah.
to you. So yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree.
Big time.
So
And I
what would
think
you
that people sometimes might think that it's like that they don't have that or that they don't know, but the
Yeah.
body will always communicate in some way. Like my last year in corporate, I got ill like 12, I
Hmm.
got ill 12 times and always with very odd things.
Yeah.
For instance, I remember getting like some kind of sinus thing, and then I got some other kind of thing, and so like they weren't just a common cold. It was like my body
Right.
just kept on giving me these things. My
Yeah.
boss was like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't
Yeah.
know, but I'm just getting sick all the
Yeah.
time." So the
All the
body will communicate in physical pain, chronic fatigue.
time. Hmm.
It will gut problems.
Migraines was a big
I
one.
had a hip problem, migraines, right? Yeah, for sure. I had like a
Yeah.
really bad hip problem that I was seeing body workers for, spent thousands of pounds on body workers, and then when I quit my job and took off and started doing this, it's now like a sensitivity, but it's not a problem.
Mm,
After
mhm,
years of being
absolutely.
like in pain every time I was driving and in pain every time I was like doing all these things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think that's such an interesting one because you're right when you said the part of a lot of people think it's not accessible to them or they don't have it or they're
yeah.
not connected or whatever it looks like.
Mm,
So, is there a way that you would guide someone to start to tap into that? Because it can be a scary thing for people because the
mm,
unknown is always the scariest. It's the place that anxiety breeds from
yeah.
because it's unknown, it's uncertain. We don't know what's going to unfold. And the trust that it takes can be a lot for some. And if we're not in that
Mm.
place of true connectedness and trusting the felt sense, how do we start to cultivate that? Is there a starting point for those who maybe actually don't know where to begin?
I guess as you're speaking, I'm thinking of coming to this like with a question. For instance, if
Mm,
somebody had a particular place where they're feeling quite stuck in their life,
mhm,
then you could start using this felt sense or your body or this start tapping into this inner wisdom in different ways in order to guide you somewhat. So if you're wondering whether there's something that needs to change, for instance, you might start to question like how you have been feeling in your body. That could be start to be a guide.
mhm,
Like, are you aligned with your work or with your relationship, or what is your general energy been like in your body, or are you
mhm,
suffering from some ongoing physical pain? That would
mhm.
be one way to start questioning that.
Yeah.
I mean, because everything in your body always has the emotional component,
Mhm.
even if it's something physical. So I would say physical pain is quite a clear guide.
Yeah,
If you're noticing
absolutely.
you're getting a lot of tightness in some place, and I'm not saying that you're going to wake up one day in this most perfect work with this perfect relationship, perfect life, and your body's just going to be like soft and
Yeah.
squidgy like a baby's again, which would be amazing. It's probably a lifetime journey, but you could
Yeah.
definitely look at like what is right here, right now.
Mhm.
And then I believe that we do always know. And if we have that belief that I always know, like I always know what's the right thing for me, then you will find that you always know. If it's something like going out tonight or something and you're wondering whether you feel like it or not, if you feel into the going out and you feel a surge of energy and joy, then that
Yeah.
would be right. Or if you feel kind of exhausted and fatigued, you wouldn't be. Actually, another good indicator, probably a good way to describe it. My partner was asking me the other morning, he was asking me what I thought about him giving this CD meditation program to somebody. We've been following this Tibetan Buddhist meditation lineage for about 4 or 5 years now, and they have
Mm.
online programs, and you can also buy these CDs. I mean, they're not actually physical CDs, but you buy the program,
Right.
download it. And he really is excited about the work, the
Mm.
benefits that we've had from it, and he would like to share it with a friend. And he was asking me what I thought about him like giving that away. to this friend. And at first I was getting rational and I was like, well, they could buy it from Audible and it would be like free for a month. And so, you know, they could probably have it for free from there. So what would be the difference if he gave it to somebody for free? And I was sort of doing this rational
Right.
working out. And then it was like, hold on a minute, you know, what is he actually feeling around it? And I think if you're questioning something, then you already know that there's a problem there.
Yeah.
So even in his questioning of was it okay, was he was already feeling uncomfortable. It wasn't a
Yeah.
joyous like, yeah, I can't wait to give this away. It was like, oh, I feel a little bit edgy here. I'm not
Hmm.
sure if this is right or not. Then I think we instantly know that it's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's kind of that justification piece of it. Like if we're ever justifying something and saying like, "Oh, well, he could get it on Audible, so I guess it's okay." As soon as we start justifying
Yeah,
it, there's some misalignment to it. Because if we
yeah,
didn't have to justify it, we know it's right. If we're like, "Oh, yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna do this,"
It's
then
clear, yeah. So there's many
Mhm.
ways I think we get communicated our self agency or self, this knowing self will communicate with us.
So is there a way that I think this is kind of the perfect lead in of
Mm,
this idea around keeping our sense of self and our sense of truth when we're the most challenged or when boundaries are being crossed or maybe our values are being kind of threatened or questioned or
mm,
whatever that is in the moment, how is it that you keep so true to your, I guess, internal compass or your alignment in those moments of like severe challenge? Like, not just the moments of, oh, this is kind of uncomfortable, but those
mm,
moments where you're like, oh, wow, like I am being tested right here, right now. What does that look
mm.
like in those moments?
I think that's quite an interesting question because anytime we create new boundaries or get clearer on what's important for us, could be taking time out to do your creative work, whatever that
Hmm.
might be, you will always get challenges to that.
Yeah.
It's like the more clear you get, the more challenges you'll have.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting to think about because there's different ways that you can stay true to yourself. One is quite a defensive way, like
Hmm.
you're actually fighting. You know, you've kind of got your fighting stance and you're ready for like there to be a fight. And I think
Yeah.
as soon as we start bracing ourselves like that, like knowing that we're going to have to hold our ground, I think we invite that kind of energy in.
Mm.
We're kind of like primed for there to be a fight, so there is a fight.
Yeah,
Whereas if
right.
you're really clear on just what's important to you and it's with absolute love, like I really
Mm.
love myself, it's so clear because I love myself so much. And through me loving myself, I'm showing other people how to love themselves and I'm being really like loving with it. It's a much gentler energy. And
Mm.
I believe love conquers all,
Yes.
very much that feminine energy of like encompassing all. And I think it's tricky in some ways to answer that question without something specific. Like I was wondering if you had something in mind when you were like something big that somebody is challenged with. What kind of big things do we get challenged with?
Like, let's take corporate, for example. Like, a lot of people are in their office jobs or in that space of working for an employer. And a lot of the time, when you're an employee, there's this mindset or power dynamic of I need to listen to the boss. I need to do what I do so that I get the promotion or do what I have to do so that I keep my job at the end of the day. But if
Yeah.
there's moments when that boss is asking you to do something and it goes against every grain of your being and you're like, "Oh, this feels so not right. I
Mm.
disagree." But then in the background there's I need to keep my job. I need to pay the bills. I don't know what I would do if I lost this job. How, in those moments, do you speak your truth and still love, value, and respect yourself while facing that sort of challenge?
The word cognitive dissonance comes up, which is a
Mm,
psychological term where your behavior isn't matching your like thoughts and beliefs, and it creates this cognitive dissonance.
hmm.
And I guess that can be very uncomfortable for people. So we usually will try to reduce that. and bring our beliefs, our attitudes, like into alignment with our behavior. So if you're having to do something that you don't really want to be doing, one way of protecting the self, or a self-protective mechanism, is that natural like change in attitude, or some sort of rationalization of that. Like, I really know that I should be at home resting, and I've been forced to go on this work trip and I don't know how to get out of it, but I'm feeling like it's going
Mm-hmm.
to make me ill for the next week if I do this or something.
Yeah.
I suppose we make choices in those moments. But I think it's very important to practice better communication.
Mm-hmm.
And in those moments of pushback from somebody, there's always the opportunity to communicate from a really loving place where you are and why, and not make it about them.
Mm-hmm.
But there is always that choice in that, like, where do you stand, what is worth fighting for and what is not.
Yeah.
And perhaps not everything is worth fighting for. Perhaps sometimes we do give a little and
Mm-hmm.
understand that it's okay to be in service to another. But it's important that it's a choice, to have that feeling of choosing. So even if
Mm-hmm.
it is not in alignment, but you're choosing to be in service, then at least you have the power in that moment of
Yeah.
choice. So even like, I want to keep my job, you're choosing to do this to keep your job.
Mm-hmm.
It's choice. You're choosing to do that thing your partner wants to do because you want to give them this gift or make them feel good, or even
Mm-hmm.
though it's against some sense of what you desire for yourself. But there has
Yeah.
to be a limit, because if you keep doing that and keep being in service to others, then you never form your own life. You never claim your own life. You're constantly living somebody else's life,
Mm-hmm.
which
Yeah.
is like death.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that choice piece is really powerful because there's a lot of gravity in that when we can take a moment and say, okay, this person is asking this of me and I disagree wholeheartedly. I either have the choice to communicate it and say, help me understand where this is coming from and why it is that you want to do this. Help me understand this way of thinking and this rationale. Or it's like you said, you choose to be in service in that moment and say, this is a battle that maybe isn't worth fighting in this moment. And I am going to be in that space of serving and showing up in that regard. But the choice is always ours. Always, always. It doesn't come from
Yeah.
anywhere else. And it's that checking in and saying, is this a moment of give and take and kind of being in that space of serve, or is this a moment that I step up and have this open and honest communication?
And I think in these moments, because we react actually from our like reptilian brain, actually, and
Mm.
in a moment, that's the reaction that comes, is actually that deep reptilian brain, which is basically the language of sensation. It might feel like you're going to die,
Mm-hmm.
but you're actually not. It's good to check in as well and sort of be, am I
Yeah,
actually at risk of dying right now? Is
exactly.
this real? Like, is it that bad? Is it actually death? Am I going to survive this day?
Yeah.
To kind of check in a little bit and use our like higher cognitive functioning to process these deeper, like these reactions that we have to situations, and then
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make choices. I suppose I think a lot about like being, for me, like working in the corporate environment, when I sort of realized that I didn't really want to be there, but I chose to be there for a certain amount of time longer while I like worked on my next plan. Maybe I didn't really want to be there, but I didn't wake up every day and go, oh my God, I'm like so depressed. I have to do this thing and I really don't want to. It was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm working towards this other thing. And I was paying off my house that I bought. I was
Mm.
wanted to do these things. So it was always a choice. And
Yeah.
then at some point, the desire to leave was so strong. And then I felt confident enough to take the leap.
Mm.
But I think it's important to claim that empowered stance of what you're choosing, and to make sure that you are
Mm.
really choosing, like not to just go through life letting yourself be led. One of my favorite books is Clarissa Pinkola Estes, the Woman Who Run with Wolves. Have you
Oh,
read much of that?
so
Yeah.
everyone needs to read that. I
Everyone needs to read that. Yeah.
love that book.
And part of my work is actually coaching people into embodying the wisdom in that book, because
Wow.
that's where I take people into that true experience of self. She writes about, you could see life as this big like smorgasbord where there's
Mm,
just all these different things to eat,
mm,
and you could just go through life just going, oh, that looks yummy, and you just like have a bit of that, and then you're like, oh, that looks yummy, and you have a bit of that. But somebody who is in tune with their feminine soul, their like wild woman, wise wisdom self, decides what she wants, and then she doesn't even eat from the buffet unless that thing is there.
yeah.
And I believe that is a great way to think about self agency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's what it comes down to is when it's being listened and received from within, you have no choice but to listen and you're like, "Yep, if it's not on that buffet table, I'll go find it or I'll make it. I will seek that
Yeah,
out
rather
and
than
make it
just
happen."
rather than just like keeping on nibbling your way through life, being led here, being led there, being led there, kind of like just by whatever you see in front of you. And you never
Mhm.
ever come in contact then with who you really are,
Yeah.
because you haven't taken that time to really ask yourself what you really desire, what you really want, and
And
to
that's
make that
yeah,
important.
because life just kinda starts happening to you at that point. Like, it's like, "This is the buffet,
Yeah,
this is what you have to eat, this is it." But when you actually start participating from that aligned space or that heart-centered space, you're like, "Actually, no, I create and I make food and I make my own path and I do what it is that I need to do." And you start participating and living
yeah, you
from
start,
your own space. Oh, I love
which is
that.
really scary, because you're always going to come up against who you are now versus like the choices you have to make to be this different person, like ending a marriage, quitting a
Yeah.
job. Like they're not small things.
No,
Like
no.
that is the reality. To live your own life, you have to do things that are scary, real scary.
Yeah, and trust in the risk, hey, because you don't know. You have no idea what's on the other side of it. You know that it feels right in the
Yeah.
moment, but you have no idea how it's going to unfold. So to like sell
No.
the house and go through a divorce and walk away from everything that you've known, you're also
Yeah.
walking away from every story that you've created. You're walking away from this dialogue that has been your life, the story you've created of who you are, what you're worthy of, what you deserve, all
Yeah.
of these things.
Massively.
Yeah, and then that has to be shed and released and let go of to fully step into that next part of life. And it can be the letting go of those
Mm.
stories that can maybe get in the way the most because if we get rid of the material, we get rid of the house or the car or the partner, whatever
Mm.
that looks like, that's tangible. We can see that it's gone and we can understand it. But when we're trying to release our stories, our patterns, our beliefs, I find that that can sometimes be not only the most challenging part, but the hardest to, I guess, come to terms with because not only are you letting go of part of your story, but you don't really understand intellectually what's meant to take its place. And I think that's the beauty is that nothing is meant to take its place. It's meant to be that space of open silence so that you can receive and live from that place of potentiality and opportunity and experience rather than it having to be a story. Do you find that that
Mm.
comes up at all?
I suppose I have maybe a different perspective on that, and
Mm,
from my own experience and from how I tend to work with people, just in that,
awesome.
like, I really notice that we can't consciously like choose to like just let go of something. I feel like
Hmm.
what we do is more we move towards what we desire more. So letting go is actually more of a movement towards something, in
Mm,
that, like, as I started to choose things for myself. So I started to decide, I really, this is important for me to do these sexuality workshops. Like, I feel a pull towards them, I'm going to do them. As I started to do those and and then various healing happened along the way and releases in my body, I didn't just choose to feel more worthy, But I realized that I was, for the first time in my life, choosing a partner. Like I'd always been chosen
Mm,
before. And I realized that I wasn't willing to like not do this sexuality training, even though it felt really challenging to share with this new man. By the way, I'm
mhm,
not going to work in corporate anymore. I'm going to be like
mhm.
touching genitals and working with sexuality, you know. Crazy. But it was like I just had become so clear on like who I was that I then became worthy of choosing. Like following
Oh,
my
I
own
love
path made me know that that was the most important thing.
mm,
So we kind of wake up worthy if we start to follow it. Like I feel like sometimes people can get really stuck in this whole idea about we need to let go of beliefs before we can do anything. I need to work on healing my unhealthy beliefs, and I'm going to work really, really hard at healing this stuff. You know, but
mhm.
in a lot of ways what we're doing when we're doing that is we're focusing on it and we're
Yes.
giving energy to it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you focus on what you desire more, then you're giving energy to that instead.
I think that is such a incredible way to look at not only the healing path or the shift and the change. It's a much more integrative and holistic experience because I completely agree that as soon as we start focusing and saying, okay, this is what I need to work on, this is what I need to let go of, this is whatever,
Yeah,
it's exactly that. That's all that your energy is going into because
yeah,
it's this funny kind of conundrum when you look at financial abundance. People are always saying, I
yeah,
need more money because I want to change jobs or start my own business or whatever, whatever.
yeah,
There's this need for
yeah,
money. And as soon as you
yeah,
start focusing on, I don't have enough money, that's the
yeah.
energy that
Don't
you
have enough
focus on.
money.
You don't have enough. So you're going to
Yeah,
continue to not
yeah,
have enough. But when you can
yeah,
move towards the thing that's going to possibly bring money, possibly not, who knows? But if you move towards the
yeah,
thing that aligns with your, if you like, for lack of a better term, your purpose or what it is that resonates the most with you, all of
mm,
a sudden there's so much more intellectual space, emotional space
mm,
created, and you're not solely focusing on not having money. You're focusing on doing what it is that you're meant to be doing and what you want to be doing. And then those blocks start to
yeah,
fall into place. It starts to come together. So I think that's a really, I'm so
yeah.
glad you articulated that because that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that.
Mm. Thank you. It's just I've really noticed that with women with sexuality because a lot of women that I work with have had really unhealthy relationships in the past, quite
Mm-hmm.
narcissistic relationships sometimes, and unhealthy relationships. And when you want to have a healthy relationship, there can be that pull there to like go out on dates and just try and meet this next amazing person. But I
Mm-hmm.
believe that there's this step before all of that, which is where we become the person that we want to be. And then there's other things show up. So by becoming really empowered in your sexuality and able to fully tap into your own body, then the partner shows up who's ready for that kind of woman, which is the woman that you wanted to be, but you were kind of waiting
Mm-hmm.
for them to turn up so you could be that woman. And I suppose it's the same with money, like
Yeah.
how you were saying, if you start to show up as the person who is already wealthy and already has lots of ideas and like ways to create something, then
Mm-hmm.
people will start to show up to join in. Whereas if we're focusing on the need
Yeah.
space, the lack space, then you're not focusing on the creative space. It's like even when I say that, I can feel the heaviness in my body,
Me
like
too.
need. It's
Yeah.
like sort of like shut down. It's almost like I've got walls all around me or something.
Yeah.
Whereas it's very
I noticed
different to
that
focus
shift.
on what the creative. Yeah,
And that's why I just like we can't argue energetics and the quantum side of things. Like we do really
yeah,
operate on that vibrational level. We operate on those frequencies of your mood
yeah,
shifts into your thoughts then circle right back into your mood, and it's this cyclical thing. So it is truly
yeah,
about where we're putting our focus. And if our focus
yeah,
is solely on being the most connected and truest version of ourselves, all of the truest things will then fall into alignment as
yeah,
time occurs and as things progress. Those
yeah,
people do, they fall into place, they come along and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, I could never have imagined this person or this job opportunity or this
Yeah.
change. And that's the beauty of it, is that we sit here and think, okay, I want this perfect partner. But as soon as we let go of that
Mm.
ideal, like, yes, we have our values and our non negotiables, but as soon as we let go
Mm.
of the detail of it and the ideals, this person shows up and you're like, oh, you are incredible. Like, wow, where did you come from? And it's
Yeah.
exactly that. It's because
It's
you looked within.
yeah. And
Mhm.
it's really annoying that that is true. Like
Exactly.
we wish we could control things more, you know.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. I think
yeah.
one thing I would love to
Yeah.
get into with you, I'm switching gears completely here, but I think it's
Mhm.
something that just I would love to get into, and I think our listeners would love it as well. This
Mhm.
amazing orgasm. I mean, let's talk about that,
Mm.
because to have the
Mm.
space to help people not only develop a sense of such beautiful and powerful relationship with themselves and ignite their own sexuality and that intense intimacy with themselves, but then to also get an incredible orgasm on top of that. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So how does
Yeah,
that
it's pretty
unfold?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, it is amazing. I spent so much of my life feeling frustrated sexually. Like it's quite incredible now when I see this difference because I had so much with a partner, with like the guy that I was married to. Most of the time I would feel unsatisfied afterwards. It would be like, oh my God, really? It was already over, or and I just would feel frustrated.
Mhm.
And I was always feeling like I had a low libido as well, which is quite strange in a lot of ways because I've always been quite sexually curious, but as far as accessing orgasm, it was always a bit of a thing.
Mhm.
And I used to take herbal supplements and Google, like, online, you said ad for something that's supposed to like do something for your libido. I'd be like, awesome, buying.
Yeah.
And all of these things, I was always sort of trying to look at it from the outside. And it's such an amazing journey to go on to start to really discover your own body. You can think of it like this magical musical instrument. And the more you get used to playing it, you can create more and more magical symphonies. And
Mm.
it's so much more than the physical experience. I know a lot of people with self pleasure will have it very functional, like 15 minutes, quick orgasm, maybe even
Mhm.
faster than that. And using a vibrator can be very intense. You might have an orgasm very quickly, but you're never going to build that full energy in your body.
Mm.
And the most amazing orgasms are going to come from when there's an emotional connection as well, where you have
Mm.
a sense of something deeper happening in your body, not just on the physical experience, like some sort of sense of like opening up, where the orgasm like happens to you rather than you efforting to have the orgasm.
Right.
And I know they're like the golden, the magic that that we always want to have, and it's not always available in that way. But the more
Mm.
you practice and the more you learn about your body and learn how to, well, really how to assign your mind something useful to do. Because at the moment, most people's minds are distracting, pulling you away, maybe having judgments like, I wish I was getting turned on and I'm not.
Mm.
Oh, I'm thinking about what I'm doing at work tomorrow. Oh, I don't feel anything. Like all of these things.
Mhm.
Instead, we need to learn how to use your mind so that it can support you in having pleasure and you speaking to you in all these positive ways. And once
Mm.
you learn how to visualize as well and move, you could say call it moving energy around your body, you could call it visualization. You can do different things with your mind in order to open up to these really incredible orgasmic experiences.
Mhm.
And I have clients tell me things like, they've been married for 20 years and now they've had this most amazing sex, and women that have really struggled to have orgasms. I had one client which was pretty amazing. She sometimes she could give herself an orgasm, but she had learned by getting into these really awkward postures to the point where she was actually hurting her back.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
You know, people learn people learn these things because you're like, oh my god, it's so amazing to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
you develop these like incredible tactics in order to do it. Might be like tensing your whole body really, really hard, and
Right.
holding your breath, or like using loads and loads of friction on your clitoris. And you
Right.
think often that that's the only way to do it. Like I definitely thought, well, this is how I can do it. But
Right.
yeah, you can totally, anyone can learn it. So you might think that your body can't do it, that there's something different about somebody else, and that it's not possible for you to have this total surrender and these magical experiences. But it really is like just a matter of learning some tools, learning some techniques,
Mm.
and it can happen pretty quick. Like when I'm working with people, within a couple of weeks or
Wow.
within a month, you know, they're having total revolution of pleasure in their body,
Incredible.
which is kind of incredible. We're like, why won't we somebody teach us this when we were young?
Right?
Or,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
that's the thing. It's
how
such
to be with your
a,
body.
yeah, it's such a taboo topic of, oh no, that just happens behind closed doors. Nobody talks about it. It's between either you and yourself or you
Mm,
and your partner at the time. That's it.
mm,
End of story. And it's like, well, actually,
mm,
no. We're so curious and we're not taught any of these
mm.
things. Like, we're barely, I can only
Yeah,
speak for myself and public schooling, but we're barely even taught about basic anatomy. Like, we're not even taught
yeah,
how to be in our bodies or how to experience any type of somatic experience in the way of
mm,
how does this work and how do I work with it and understand my rhythm, understand
yeah,
what happens throughout like even just the cycles over the month. We are not taught how to
yeah,
work with that rhythm and that flow as well. It's so fascinating to
yeah,
me that we're not encouraged to have these conversations. Like they happen maybe over a glass of wine with your closest
yeah,
girlfriends. Maybe then you start to get into these topics, but for the
yeah.
most part, we just don't really seem to be having the conversations. Have you seen a shift in that? Do you think there's
Mm.
more open conversation now?
It's hard to know because, you know, once you're in the world of having these
Right.
conversations,
Yeah.
you meet a lot of people that are more used to that. Although I would hope that it is getting easier.
Mhm.
And I did see a show by some young people a few months ago, and they seemed to be having some conversations and that, but it still felt like they still weren't being taught things that we should be taught. They were saying about how they things around consent, and you know, they're just not
Right.
taught how to be with another. We're taught how to avoid getting STDs and not getting pregnant, but we're not taught how to be with each other,
Yeah, we're taught all the scary
like how to have
things.
relationship,
Like
how to be sensual, how to, like,
yeah.
what do we really want, and how are we different, and how are we the same, and how can we be with each other. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because I think that's the other side of it that I see is not only are we not taught all of those things, but we're also not taught
Mm,
how to first get to know what it is that we like and what it is that truly resonates with us
mm-hmm.
and brings us to that sense of intimate pleasure.
Yeah,
But on top of that, we're not taught how to communicate it. We're not really taught how
yeah.
you express that in the, because that's a very vulnerable topic for some. Some people
Mm-hmm.
do not
Oh, it's
want to have,
huge.
yeah. So to not be taught how to ask for what you want or as well as not
Not to,
ask for
first of all, we don't know what we want. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So
we
how do we
definitely, like, women
have
that
those
haven't.
conversations? Like, how are we expected
Yeah,
to say no to certain
yeah.
things, say yes to others? It's, yeah, it's a very interesting one.
To be honest, like, I don't think I would have got so comfortable or so much knowing of my own body and everything if I hadn't done all the studies that I did. Like, that's the reality. Like, I
Yeah.
had to go to workshops and learn things. I had to
Yeah.
be in space with people that were holding the space for me to, like, know that that was okay to ask for that. Or, and they weren't all like sexually explicit workshops as such, but you know, not
Mhm.
necessarily naked or anything. I think people can get very afraid of what they might come across when they go into this sort of learning,
Yeah.
but it's more about learning skills and learning ways of being,
Mhm.
and then being able to bring that into the bedroom. And with that sort of knowing, you know, the more I learned about like how a woman's body works, and it was like it normalized things that I thought I'd wanted but I didn't feel that I had the right to ask for.
Yeah.
like to slow down or whatever that might be, just like knowing that my body is different to, if you're in a heterosexual relationship, knowing that the man and the woman's bodies function differently with sexual
Hmm.
arousal. And once I learned more, then yeah, I felt so much more ease with asking, because it was like, no, this is just a woman's body, not like I've got something wrong with me that I'm taking so long, or that I
Hmm.
need this thing that he doesn't need, or
Yeah. Wow.
it's so relieving.
And it's so nice to
Yeah,
see that these conversations and workshops are continuing and they are out there
yeah,
and available. Absolutely. Because that's how this all
yeah,
changes, having the conversation and
yeah,
exploring and really educating ourselves and possibly working into that space of acceptance of, okay, this is my body, it's not anyone else's. I need to get curious and develop this intimate relationship and get to know myself on that level so that I can then communicate
mm,
it, or I can then experience something
yeah,
different than what I have been experiencing. So I think that cultivating of curiosity and intimacy with yourself is
yeah.
so invaluable. Absolutely.
And it actually does take a level of discipline as well to do that, because
Mm,
if you were like learning an instrument, you're learning to play piano. I mean, how many times a week would you have to practice in order to become really good
yeah.
at the piano? You would have to practice. And that was another big part that I just had no idea about. I just wouldn't have thought that, you had to practice. And you
Right.
literally do. Like, some of my learnings involved doing an erotic practice, self pleasure practice every day for one whole month, for
Oh my
every day
gosh.
for 2 whole weeks.
Yeah.
I dedicated myself to learning.
Like, this is my
It
homework.
took discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took discipline. I had to not do other things. I
Wow.
had to work out like what time of day was the best time of day to do this. Was it before going to work? Was it after work? Was it last thing at
Oh my
night?
gosh.
Did that
I'm
really
sure
work for
some
me?
listeners are like,
You
she
learn so
has
much
the
about each
best job.
other.
Yeah.
But
Wow, I
that
love it.
was that's the piece about like having what you desire. Like, what action are you willing to take to have what you desire? Like,
Yeah,
wishing and hoping is like, it's just a fantasy. It can distract you, I
exactly.
think, when you spend lots of time, oh, I really want this thing, but you're not taking any action.
Yeah. And that goes across the board. Hey, it
Yeah,
goes right back into what we were talking about earlier. Like, it
yeah,
takes work. You have to kind of
yeah.
show up for yourself and say,
You
hey,
have to
this is
take
what I
action.
want. I'm making it happen. So, yeah, it
Yeah,
is. It's that dedication and
yeah,
commitment, committing to yourself. How profound is
yeah,
that concept? Hey,
yeah. And then the
incredible.
action always needs to be in alignment with who you are, whether what feels like the action for you. Like,
Yeah,
you can't copy somebody else's actions assuming that you'll get the same outcome.
exactly. Yeah,
You have to,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Nina, I
Mm.
do have one more
Yeah.
question for you. And this is
Okay.
my absolute favorite question because I think this gets into a little bit more of your centered truth of what it is that you kind of want to see on that bigger scale. So, if you look at, I guess, today's society or our global community, global society, when you look at
Mm.
that, is there one big change that you want to see made or one big societal norm that you would want to see disrupted? And what is that shift and why?
My passion, like total passion, is for women to really come into their full leadership and full sexuality as women, because I believe that's
Mm,
the biggest missing link. We spent
mhm,
hundreds of years being shamed for being sexual, for enjoying sex, for being shut down in this way. There's so much sexual trauma, and the pelvic region, the sexual center, is the place of all your creativity and your power. And if you're not residing there, if you have to dissociate because of whatever's happened in your past, or you've had trauma, or you just never really learned how to be safe being sexual,
mm,
then you're only operating at, like, a lower lower capacity of what's available for you in your life. So
mm.
for me, that's like the biggest changes. I just would really love to bring more of this healing and awakening to people all around the world, but particularly also in trauma, areas like war zone places like that, because it's the first thing that people, women get harmed in that way. That's the biggest way to shut down someone's life force, is to attack their sexual self. So yeah, I see it as a massive opportunity for change in the planet, because women are stepping more into leadership, and the more that we have women coming from this full, like, embodied, heart-centered, grounded place, then it's going to be more useful. We don't need more women that behave like men. We want women who are tapped into their true power, their full everything power. So yeah, that would be the biggest change for me, is to create more projects around this.
Wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's so
I mean, it's
beautiful.
huge. I can't even like fathom it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so there's all the schools, and there's
Yeah.
all of these people that need healing, and there's all of these people that have the opportunity to really step into themselves, but they haven't done that part yet. I know a lot of people that go to yoga and meditation have yet to tap into the sexual aspect, that they've done a lot of healing in other ways, but they haven't been there yet. And it's such
Yeah.
a huge opportunity for expansion, because it's your creative center. It's
Yeah.
money, sex and money. It's the same root chakra. It's all the same stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's so beautifully put, because it's not about the feminine taking over or kind of rising up to be all that there is. It's absolutely about that place of balance and coming into a sense of equality and rising from that place of wholeheartedness, that centered, that embodiment. I think that's so
Mm.
so valuable. And yeah, if we could
And
get
sexually
those.
awake, like proud to be sensual and sexual, like
Yeah,
women are like so shamed for like being sexy, unless you live in a South American country where it's like, woohoo, there's lots of,
exactly.
you can shake your hips and be celebrated. But in a lot of our Western countries, we're just totally shut down, and
It's
women will be bitchy to
crazy.
other women. And
Yeah.
like, I just want this world to be, for people to be able to be all their fullness.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
it.
feel
Their
safe.
fullness, who they are. Like, why
Mm,
do we have
mm,
to look at it any other way than to celebrate everyone for what they are at their core, and that they have
mm,
stepped into that and owned it and
mm,
are living from
mm,
that place? Because could you imagine the world
mm.
if every single person was just so powerfully allowed to be their most authentic and embodied selves? Like, holy moly,
Yeah,
how incredible.
I'm turned on, so yeah,
Yeah.
I know it'd be
So,
amazing. Would be in the right places,
yeah,
the right
absolutely.
relationships and the right, yeah, for sure.
Well, I see
Hmm.
the work that you're doing, Nina, and it is so inspiring and just empowering to see that it is available to live in that embodied space and to be our fullest and truest selves. So, the work that you're doing definitely does not go unnoticed. It's so appreciated and valued, and that ripple effect is going to impact way more than we can ever imagine. So it's really incredible to see you in that space. And I will link into how to get in touch with you or how to follow you and see what's going on. That'll all
Hmm.
be in the bio description, so that if there's a call, there will be more connections made for sure, because this work is just so potent and has the ability to not only transform individual lives, but that collective as well. So I so greatly appreciate your time. And I'm so honored that we had this platform to connect and really bring these conversations to light. So thank you.
You're so welcome. This has been fun. So
Mm.
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. And if there's anything at all that you want to explore or you have ideas about and want to get into, please drop me a line. You can find us at the Self Agency Advocate on both Facebook and Instagram. and I would absolutely love to chat. So let's connect.